Okay, well, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining this meeting. It's going to be a small group, but to be honest, I really think that this is actually going to be better because we have a good variety of people on the call who represent different positions. And my hope is that we can kind of hear one another's side. And in particular, the purpose of this call, since it is sponsored by Woodley Park Main Street, the purpose is really to hear the business owner's side. So, you know, we all have our own personal beliefs about bike lanes and about how Connecticut Avenue should look. I am on the board of Woodley Park Main Street. I own a business in Woodley Park on Connecticut Avenue. I live on Connecticut Avenue in Cleveland Park. So I'm coming at this, I ride a bike, though not well. So I'm coming at this from different angles, but I just want to make clear for everyone on the call and everyone who's going to be watching this after the fact, that Woodley Park Main Street absolutely is not taking a position yet on bike lanes and the DDOT concepts. It's very important to us, and I think DeAndre will second this. It's very important to us that we act in the best interest of the businesses. And so for that reason, we have not taken a position, even though we've certainly been asked to by different groups on more than one occasion. So this is an opportunity for us to kind of hear from the Washington Area Bicyclists Association, hear from the business owners. One of the main reasons why I wanted to have this call was because I think that there's been this, you know, one side bike lanes, one side business owners, and I really think that that's misguided. I truly believe that we are all on the same side. And if anybody's the enemy, maybe it's the commuters who are barreling down Connecticut Avenue and not riding their bikes and not protecting the environment, and certainly not looking at my store or other stores. So I'm really hopeful that we will find that we have a lot more in common at the end of this call. So WABA is going to give a short presentation, and we have Garrett and Josh who are with WABA. We have DeAndre, who is the director of Woodley Park Main Street, and then Alan, who's the owner of Allen Woods Flower Shop, and May, who is the manager at Woodley Ace Hardware. And of course, I'm the owner of Baked by Yael. So Josh and Garrett are just going to give a short presentation. They understand, I've had many conversations with them, and they understand that it is their job to try to convince us that bike lanes are in our best interest, first and foremost. So they'll give a presentation, and then really this is just supposed to be a dialogue. So Alan and May, I'm going to try not to chime in that much, but Alan and May, this is your chance to really just like grill them and have at it and see if we can all come to some sort of agreement on this. So with that being said, I will turn it over to Josh.
Great. Hi, thanks so much, Yael, for pulling this all together. Really appreciate the chance to talk. Just brief intros. My name is Josh Rising. Actually, let me
Josh, I was going to pull those up if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. And then, yeah, is it possible to share screen with Garrett? Perfect. It's great. So yeah, my name's Josh Rising. I live up by Chevy Chase Circle. Spent a lot of time on Connecticut Avenue, whether it was getting to my job downtown or getting the kids to and from Eden Montessori School. And certainly spent less time on the Avenue over the past year. And I have to say, I do kind of miss it. So I'm going to turn it over to Garrett, who can introduce himself, and he'll do kind of the first part of the presentation, and then I'll take over partway through. I do need to apologize in advance. I need to take my oldest son to soccer practice around 7:15, but I think we should be able to have a good discussion through that part, and Garrett can stick on afterwards as well.
Thanks, Josh. My name is Garrett Hennigan. I'm a community organizer with the Washington Area Bicyclists Association. If you aren't familiar with what WABA is and works for, we work in the Washington area, so Washington, D.C. and the surrounding jurisdictions, largely working to make bicycling more accessible, safer, and more popular around the Washington area. And a large part of how we do that is by working with governments and communities to make our streets safer and more inviting for bicycling. A little about me, I actually grew up in Ward 3 up in Chevy Chase, lived in the district, since then. I'm now in Ward 5, but I'm over there passing through and stopping often, almost every week. So
One other thing too, Garrett, sorry to interrupt. Other thing I wanted to say is that the reason that I, along with some other people, started the Ward 3 Bicycle Advocates a few years ago was that we really felt, compared to other parts of the city, that this part hadn't done that much with making it easier and safer to bike, right? A lot of protected lanes once you get in the downtown area, some of the other corridors. But Ward 3, when I started the organization, had 0 protected bike lanes anywhere in the area, which made me help start the organization. Sorry, Garrett, for the interruption.
You're good. So as Yael mentioned, we just wanted to sort of plant a couple of seeds, get a few discussion topics going, and then really looking forward to hearing from you all, answering any questions you might have. I do think this is an area where, we all have ideas of what is best for Connecticut Avenue, and I think the only way to get there is by talking through them and having an understanding. So first sort of big concept I wanted to throw out is a notion of complete streets. Many of the streets that we have around the District of Columbia, including Connecticut Avenue, is not what we would call a complete street. So we know that who and what users we design a street for really determines who ends up using them. So Connecticut Avenue is designed to move a bunch of cars pretty quickly, and it does that pretty well. So it serves drivers, it serves transit, people using buses and connecting to the Red Line. It also serves walking because there's a bunch of wide sidewalks. But when we look at, say, people biking or using scooters, or some of the other ways that people might choose to get around, there isn't really a great accommodation of that. Yes, you technically can hop on a bike and travel on Connecticut Avenue, but it's really not comfortable for a lot of people. So when we talk about building complete streets, it's often about what do we have to do to make this place safe and comfortable for not just a small subset of people who might use that street, but all people. And this is this graphic here is just a fun artist rendering of what a lot of our streets can feel like. These wide swaths of asphalt that if you're not in a car, you do not go there. And so I think first idea I want to plant is that the streets that we have, we can choose how they're used and to what purpose. And yeah, so we're talking in this broader discussion about Connecticut Avenue. One of the topics that certainly comes up in bicycling circles is this notion of protected bike lanes. And I just wanted to give a quick sort of definition of what those are. So a protected bike lane, it's an on-street bike lane that's separated from moving traffic, from auto traffic, by some sort of barrier, whether that's a post or a parked car, or planter boxes or curb medians, but it's separated from the activity of traffic in the street. A few things you might not know that may seem a little unintuitive, but are borne out pretty well in the data. Protected bike lanes, where they're put in, there's a marked decline in crashes, not just for people biking, but also people walking and people driving and using sort of other ways of getting around the street, mostly because every user has a space that is nicely demarcated for themselves. So drivers have a space that's predictable, pedestrians have a space on the sidewalk, and people using bikes or scooters, they have a space too. We also know from not just in the district, but sort of around the country, protected bike lanes are great at coaxing some of those more tentative riders off the sidewalk. So we often hear there are too many too many people riding scooters on the sidewalk, too many people riding bikes here. On 15th Street, as an example, was the first protected bike lane that DC built. As once that lane was put in on 15th Street, which had a lot of sidewalk bicycling, dropped 60% after that lane was put in. And the neighbors around there love it for that reason. Also really great at creating a low stress environment, which we'll be talking about in just a moment. They calm traffic, so they can slow down drivers to the extent that they're speeding. They can encourage drivers to drive a little closer to the speed limit. And for pedestrians, they can often be great because they narrow the road, shorten the distance they have to cross. So protected bike lanes are They may look like this. There are a lot of different designs. I mentioned this concept of low stress, and I think this is really pivotal to understand why it is that we might look at Connecticut Avenue and say, let's change up how some of that space is used for a protected bike lane versus something that's less substantial. This is a chart that basically shows the results of some national research that's been done again and again and again and corroborated. But basically the notion is that the people you see riding bikes in most cities and most parts of the district today are just a small subset, small fraction of the potential for getting people on bikes for, transportation, for fun, for errands. There's this huge 51 to 56% of people who are interested in bicycling for more trips, whether that's to school or to work or to a friend's house for some errands, but they're really concerned for their safety. They look at most of the roads around and they say, I'm interested, but if this is what I have to ride a bike on, I'm not going to do it. So to get more people biking, for more of those trips, we really need to look at what creates a low stress experience that's comfortable, and think about how do we create a network, not just a few streets here and there, but a usable network that connects from one place over to another. And on a place like Connecticut Avenue, we think that this is a really big opportunity. If fewer than 10% of people who you see riding bikes on Connecticut are there just because they're the only ones who will put up with the stress of riding there, it means that potentially a whole lot of people could be zipping up and down Connecticut Avenue, going from their homes to nearby businesses and further downtown, if we just made some changes to it. So when we think about low stress, it's about sort of what's the environment there, but it's also about that network. So is it a continuous experience? Is it broken up or continuous from A to B? Is it direct? Do I have to take 15 turns to keep this low stress experience, or can I get there pretty easily and directly? And is it intuitive? Am I going to get lost trying to follow this route? So low stress is really important. Just a few quick sort of facts on protected bike lanes. Again, we did some recent polling with a group, talking with likely voters in the district. And we found that this idea of protected bike lanes and a network of them was extremely popular. Again, most people are interested, but they're concerned. If you offer them an opportunity for more safe places to ride a bike or a scooter, they will say yes. 79% of likely voters, would support a protected bike lane network. So just a few of the reasons, that's all general DC stuff, that's citywide stuff. But of course, here we are talking with Woodley Park Main Street, and you all are business owners, and you're very focused on sort of what's happening on your street. So wanted to chat through just a few reasons why bikeable and walkable streets might be good for you. And Josh is going to follow up with some more. But first and foremost, this is about remembering back to that first image of people walking along a narrow precipice with a huge chasm in between. Bikeable and walkable streets could be good for your business because you might look out your window and see a street that, yes, you can walk there. Yes, you can bike there. You certainly can drive there. But we can reimagine what that street looks like. We could make it a much more pleasant place to be, one that prioritizes not moving cars quickly around, people from up in Maryland all the way down to downtown DC, but a street that's actually prioritizing the people who live nearby and come here and shop frequently, building that community. Bikeable and walkable streets are safer. I mentioned some of those reasons, but streets with protected bike lanes are 30 to 90%. The research says, they see 30 to 90% fewer crashes. They're more efficient. So if you're just trying to move people in cars, the average occupancy of a car is less than 1.2. So between 1 and 2 people in that car, that takes up a lot of space, especially if you want to move a lot at a time. Buses, certainly you can cram more people into them, and in a narrow bike lane, you can actually fit a whole lot of people biking, just like you can fit a whole lot of people walking in a narrow sidewalk. Though wider sidewalks are always better. So they're nice and efficient. Another reason that bikeable and walkable streets are really great is that they create spaces that people actually enjoy spending time in. I think there's some wonderful spaces on Connecticut Avenue. I grew up walking up and down it, driving up and down it, taking the bus up and down it. There's some wonderful spaces there, but I think we'd all agree that they're just like the traffic noise that you're hearing here with my local fire station. There are a lot of places that have a lot of noise that are really dominated by that car traffic that make it a pretty unpleasant place to be. I think this is an opportunity to think, how could we improve some of those spaces? Bikeable and walkable streets are great for promoting sustainable transportation, not just the biking and walking, but also the transit, getting people.
No, enjoy your cake.
Please have some salad. Not to worry. And of course, I think the last thing is they're inclusive for people, of all ages. So whether you're walking, biking, driving, a safer street that's designed for some slower speeds is just more inclusive. That mouthful aside, Josh wanted to dive a little more into the specifics of Connecticut Avenue. So I think I'll turn it over to you there.
Yep, great. Thanks so much, Garrett. Can you advance the next slide? Great, there we are. Thanks, and I'll keep moving along relatively quickly because I want to make sure we've got some time for discussion here. I think people here on the call are probably aware at this point that it looks like there's three main options that DDOT is looking at for the road. There's the keep the status quo, go with option B, which removes the reversible lane, has 3 driving lanes during rush hour and 2 with parking on each side during non-rush hours. And then there's option C, which puts in the protected bike lane, preserves parking and loading for 24 hours on one side, but then kind of eliminates the parking on the other side and adds in left turn lanes at key intersections. Next slide. That's unfortunate.
All right, I'm not sure what that's about. Let me, 1 second. That is unexpected. Yeah, because, sorry, 1 second. Let me go find.
All right, I'll keep talking while Garrett's kind of working on this. So I think when it comes to option C, we've really heard kind of 2 main concerns kind of, from the community writ large and in talking with business owners as well. So we'll spend kind of just a minute talking about each of those, but then we really want to have a discussion. The first of these is parking. And then the second is whether fewer traffic lanes could lead to diversion kind of and congestion on some of the adjacent or alternative roads to Connecticut Avenue. So, the parking issue, certainly is real and want to kind of talk about that. As we look at it, kind of our sense is that the parking will be very block dependent, with some areas kind of having a different effect than others. Great, can you go ahead and go to the other one, Garrett? Next one. Great, so so for example, so I tried to look in detail kind of at the slides that DDOT's presented, especially for the Woodley Park area. And so I looked at the slide for the Woodley to Calvert section. And it looked like that they were projecting there would be 6 fewer on-street parking spots out of 24. So those 6 on the west side of the avenue wouldn't be present, but then you would still have kind of the others on the east side. But I think from our perspective, and I'm really interested to kind of hear your feedback on this as well, is that concept C does add rush hour parking, which seems to be where I would imagine would be a time that businesses could do a lot of business. And so rush hour parking, 2.5 hours in the morning, 2.5 in the evening, that's a total of 5 hours of parking each day during the week, Monday through Friday. So I tried to do just a little back of the envelope math here, right? So what happens if a business is open from 8 to 8 during the week? Well, in status quo as it is now and with concept B, so you have 8 available hours of parking. It's a 12-hour window, but you've lost 4 hours because there's no parking during rush hour. So that gets you to 8 available hours times those 24 spots, gives you 192 hours when people could be parking at different spots, kind of in that particular stretch. So concept C has 12 available hours, because now parking is preserved even during rush hour periods, times the 18 spots, for a total of 216 parking hours. And I recognize, again, this effect is going to vary from block to block and from store to store, depending on what their operating hours are going to be. But I think from our perspective, this addition of rush hour parking should be something that hopefully would make Concept C attractive to businesses, and do want to have some more feedback on. I think too, building on what Garrett said about kind of the, building a place where people want to spend time, is this notion that, even right now, my sense is people aren't driving to any of the stores on Connecticut Avenue because there's plentiful parking, right? Parking is already scarce wherever you are along the avenue. But people are going to the stores because they live close to the stores and can easily get there, or they're passing by for one reason or another, right? To their kids' soccer practice or to work or anything like that. So things that can be done to make it more attractive and easier for people to come by and stop is something that I think would be helpful for businesses. And I do think that's where some of the making this an easier place for people to bike can come in. We'll get to that a little bit more in just a minute. Next slide, Garrett. Diversion, just want to go on this. I know this isn't the focus kind of the business community, but it comes up from time to time. DDOT has modeled what they think could happen if the number of lanes of traffic were reduced. They've concluded the increase is, quote, modest, their word, not mine. And they say that parallel and collector roadways can accommodate these modest increases in volume. I do want to point out that their analyses claiming that don't account for people now deciding they don't need to drive and they can bike instead because it's now safer and there's this great bike lane. And they also don't account for an increase in the percent of people who are working from home. Clearly, traffic is still way down from where it was before the pandemic. I don't anticipate it will stay at this level, but I think it's reasonable to assume it's not going to go back right the way that it was immediately. And I have just pulled one quote from an Ernst & Young study that was done concluded there will be greater levels of remote working. And even if the remote work goes up by 10%, a 10% decrease in traffic volume is going to really improve the traffic situation on Connecticut Avenue dramatically. Next one. So the evidence does show that if you build bike lanes, people will use them. One of my earlier slides had a link to the New York Times study or an article in the Times that was done looking at what had happened in Europe, where they did a bunch of kind of these, quote, pop-up bike lanes because of the pandemic. And biking increased 50% in the cities that put these in compared to cities that didn't, which is certainly a non-trivial increase. DDOT estimates there'll be 3,000 daily trips by bicycle on Connecticut Avenue if a protected bicycle lane were put in. Or, in my mind, that's 3,000 customers who are riding by shops relatively slowly who could be enticed to stop there. And it certainly is much, much easier to park a bicycle than it is to park a car. Certainly there are some types of things easier to put on your bicycle than others, but I think there's a lot of different items. People, the pictures of what people can carry on their bicycles are really impressive. Increased use of electric bikes is going to help a lot with this, especially given how hilly this section of town is. And you can clearly see as DC has built out kind of the protected bike lanes, there has been an increase elsewhere in the city. Briefly, there is a literature on what happens when you add bike lanes to businesses. Generally, the literature as a whole finds that generally it has no effect or can be helpful, even when parking is removed. Clearly, each one of these, no one of these cities or studies will be an exact replica for Connecticut Avenue. The conditions are going to be different from city to city. But in my mind, what's generally striking is the consistency of the evidence. And these studies have generally concluded that people who bike purchase less for every stop than people who would stop by car, but they stop more often. And again, that's because it's relatively easier for them to stop. Next slide. So I think I generally wanted to kind of wrap up there. Again, I think, what I want to engage people in too kind of is the sense that people who come to the stores, both in Woodley Park, but the other core areas, right? Chevy Chase, Van Ness, Cleveland Park, they're not coming there because there is plentiful parking. They're coming there because they live in the neighborhood and they're passing by. And so figuring out ways to entice those who are passing by or living there to come to the business, in my mind, is a very important proposition to figure out regardless of bike lane or no bike lane. But I think in our mind, bike lanes are a very attractive way to make it easy for people who are passing by to be able to stop and patronize the business. So just interested kind of in thoughts and questions and comments.
Thank you, Josh and Garrett. And just one other thing to note that is kind of interesting. I had my staff over the course of about a day and a half or so keep a log of how people were getting to Baked by L. And they only got 49 transactions. So we're going to try to be more organized because we didn't get a large sample. But I actually thought that most of my customers drove too. And I thought most of them did curbside pickup. Interestingly, 60% of them walked. And I was really surprised by that because even as somebody who supports bike lanes and has owned a business along Connecticut Avenue for several years, I perceived people driving as being much greater than it actually is. So with that being said, Alan and May, and certainly, Deandra, if you have any questions on behalf of Main Street, just have at it. This is, Alan, this is your opportunity to, to have a nice, civil, fruitful conversation. So lay it on Garrett and Josh. What are your concerns? And you have to unmute yourself too. There you go. You good?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. In the beginning of this, I was very upset because there were these plans from DDOT that were considering eliminating all parking on Connecticut Avenue in preference to bike lanes, which in my opinion is a ridiculous idea that, we'd have to move, be the only thing. I do think that the reality is there's not a lot of room. There's only 60 feet across there with 6 lanes. And giving up a lane for the bike lanes, even with Plan B and Plan C, I'm sort of, I feel like would be livable because parking really wouldn't be that reduced. But I think there will be more traffic problems going up and down Connecticut Avenue than the predictions, imply. I think that especially in the beginning, when there'll be less people working in the offices, but I think more people are going to drive because of hesitancy. They're, none of my employees they used to all take the metro, which is right across the street, but no one will take the metro anymore. No one will ride on a bus. They come back and forth in their cars because they're afraid.
Yeah, no, I think it's tough.
Yeah.
I think because I do think there really is an opportunity to reshape people's behavior, right? Because they haven't gone to the office yet. So if they put bike lanes were in tomorrow and people were going back to work, they might think maybe I could give this new thing a try. It's from my perspective, it's too bad for the time.
I don't know, if I lived in Chevy Chase, I think going to work would be okay, but maybe not coming home.
That's why you need the electric.
That's where the electric bike comes in. Yeah.
Bingo. I think Josh and I know that hill very well.
In
all 5 of them.
In my youth, I used to ride a bike.
People here haven't ridden an electric bike. It is totally worth it. It is just it is so much fun. You just go up a hill, it's
Doesn't kind of defeat the point of the good exercise. I mean, I don't know.
That's true. You're still on the environment. So Alan, one thing I want to understand is, so it seems like the studies are showing, and I'm sure you can find studies that say anything you want, but it seems like generally the studies are showing that the traffic won't be as bad as we think it is. But my question to you is, just hypothetically, if traffic were bad, do you think that would hurt our business I mean, because I just don't really see, in my mind, how could it be any worse than it is? So if you say you can, it won't get any worse, and in fact, you could potentially have thousands of more customers.
I think that the worst part, business aside, is the safety of when, as you know, I used to live way up on Connecticut Avenue, back in the day, and there'd be like some accident or construction, and I would just, cut through the side streets and go over to Reno Road, and go up that way. And that's what everybody else will do. And so I think that's gonna, if it does in fact back up, all the traffic's gonna divert through these neighborhoods. And is that safer? Not really.
Well, but I mean, of course, safety is an issue, but in terms of your business, because and particularly Woodley Park Main Street, we want to make decisions. Obviously, we're not going to take a position that we feel is in any way unsafe. So there's no question about that.
Right.
But we're being asked to take a position on bike lanes and how it affects businesses,
right.
And you're one of the most.
I think that since they're retaining in Plan B and C, most of the parking, at least in Woodley Park, I'm pretty much okay with it. And I think that, aside from rush hour, it will be okay. And I mean, hopefully there will be less people driving in, automobiles, but I have my serious doubts about that. I think it's going to be.
That's very exciting to hear. I don't think that that's really come up in any of the conversations with DDOT, just in terms of, okay, now they're actually understanding what the concepts are. It's actually not going to affect parking, and in fact, especially on your side, could actually help, right? Because you'll have even more parking during rush hour.
I do feel for the businesses on our side of the street, parking would be retained.
You're not muted, but I can't quite hear you. Can anybody hear it?
What? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Got you.
Better? Yep. Okay. So I think like on the west side of the street, which is where my store is, I think that's where the parking would be. But the east side of the street, they would eliminate the parking, I believe. So, I mean, that's kind of unfortunate for those businesses, because.
I think each block is like, it wouldn't all be on, like, for the whole length of Connecticut Avenue. There's some places where they could have parking on the east side, and there's some places they could have it on the west side.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the same way, kind of all the way up and down.
All the way up, but
the avenue. But that's the schematic that I saw in for kind of that section.
And that's for both B and C?
Well, I think so the way that they're gonna the way they're thinking about this, sort of the difference between B and C, it is basically for option C, they can sort of squeeze down everything where everything is the bike lane and the space next to the bike lane. They can squeeze that down in certain, in blocks, especially commercial blocks where parking or loading is really helpful, to create space for on one side of the street, a strip of full-time, like 24 hours a day, be it loading or parking or pickup drop-off. So that only on one side of the street, but 24 hours a day. So even during rush hour, you could have a truck pull up there and do some loading. But what Josh was saying was, it depending on the block, and they haven't decided this yet. It'll probably be worked out if they go with option C. That where exactly that parking is will be worked out block by block in consultation with the local businesses.
But I think the main takeaway though is, so concept C has parking during a rush hour. Concept B that has no parking during rush hour. But then during the non-rush hour periods, it's both sides in concept B and one side in concept C.
Okay, so I'd like to hear what May has to say, because it seems like it's going to affect Ace Hardware a little bit more than it would Alan. So May, if you could jump in there.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. I am from DC. I've never driven, and I own an electric bike, though it's not as powerful as those ones that just see me up the hill. Just for context of some of my opinions, obviously I am the manager of the owner, though I have spoken with our owner. a little bit about this. We are already impacted by the level of parking that is available in Woodley Park. None of the proposals change that so drastically as to make much of a difference. Very few people rely on our store thinking that they will be able to come park. I think that there's no ideal solution for everyone, right? But I think that I'm all for bike lanes. I'm all for the best version of moving this forward that everybody can agree on. Because I think in the short and long term, the way that we commute, I mean, I don't have to explain this to WABA people, right? But I think this is going to be a positive thing. I have a lot of customers who commute by bicycle to my store already, and I have some that would do more so if it was easier to bike up and down Connecticut. I would probably ride my bike all the way from Silver Spring sometimes if it was easier to bike up and down Connecticut. I mean, it's a huge thing for me too. But yeah, I mean, there's never going to be, if the alternative to this bike lane project was that we were going to get, a parking structure, then maybe I would have to think about it, right? But as it stands, I think it would benefit everybody. It just takes some adjustment in the mentality of people. And I know that after the initial construction, right, the transitional period could be, again, an adjustment, but I don't think it would impact us negatively. I think it would only impact us positively, is the short of it. Sorry that I'm not as polished as some of you guys talking about this, but I'm all for it.
I wonder how your loading would go.
We do most things we do on 24th Street. And so it would pretty much, the only difference would be if there was something that we wanted loaded on Connecticut in a place that was affected, we would probably just have to get an electric pallet jack instead of a manual, which is a good thing to have anyway, and not
You
a
bring
huge.
everything off 24th Street mostly now already.
Yeah, already we do most things off 24th. At least we get 2 weekly replenishments from our warehouse. We do that off of 24th Street already. And a lot of vendors that come by, like third-party vendors, when we get large pottery shipments and whatnot, we do some of those on Connecticut early in the morning. But it's already a nightmare to do that.
We load everything in through the front door. So
exactly. So I've dragged pallets. I've helped drivers drag pallets from like 2-3 blocks away because there's nowhere to do it. So it wouldn't. I don't think it would be any different. I do think it would require the investment of a electronic pallet jack, which I'm okay with.
We find that most of our deliveries come early in the morning and they double park if they have to. There is a loading zone right in front of our shop anyway already. So
nice.
Yeah, I wanted to pull up this graphic just so we're sort of looking at, or have a similar idea in our mind. This is basically like if you're standing in the middle of the street and looking north or south, those protected bike lanes will be against the curb. And on the right side of this image, you see it's depicted sort of a ride share pickup drop-off zone, but that could be a loading zone.
One side of the street there. It's
correct.
But,
correct. So again, this could be, and I don't actually know which side the DDOT folks are discussing in Woodley Park to put that on, but it could be on either side.
But I thought both bike lanes were going to be on one side. Is that not correct?
No, so that was one of the ideas that was floated around for a number of sort of space constrained reasons and safety reasons. This was the configuration. So one bike lane in each direction against each curb.
Yeah, the main issue is cars turning left across other traffic and then crossing the bike lane where you'd have cyclists coming from 2 directions was too much of a safety risk for that. There's too many directions for a driver to look at safely. So they went back to this one.
DeAndre, what do you think other businesses, I mean, certainly we're not going to just make a decision based on tonight, but what do you, since we have Josh and Garrett here, what other concerns do you think businesses might have about Concept C?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I was just thinking loading. I'm just thinking of the businesses that are on that side. M&T, bank, they don't have any loading issue. And district kitchen, like May does, they take their loading from the back.
And I mean, like the Uber and the DoorDash drivers that for the going to the restaurants, they're already double parking, I think like Alan said, for other people. So we don't want to support anything that's going to hurt businesses. Even if we all agreed that in a couple of years we'd have thousands of more customers and everything would be great, none of us wants to go out of business in the meantime. So we need to know that, that our business will improve in the long term, and that in the short term we will be able to survive. Otherwise, like what's the point?
Right.
But it sounds like if the parking hours remains relatively the same, if it's no worse off than the status quo, then I don't know. I mean, I'm just having trouble seeing a downside.
I like the idea of reducing the parking time. Now you can park there for 2 hours, like, in Woodley, and they're going to reduce it to 30 minutes, which I think is a huge difference.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
then you won't have these people parking there, all the time.
Well, Garrett
To use the metro.
and Josh.
Well, I
if
think
you
for a
can
while,
make
people are gonna-
Josh is leaving. Okay, so
Yeah,
Garrett.
I'm really sorry, guys. Look forward to
Oh,
catching up on the rest of the discussion.
Yeah.
Apologies, but thanks everybody for your time.
Right.
Okay.
You
thank
have me for as long as you like.
And so Garrett, I mean, maybe you could just make a note of this, because particularly as you're advocating for bike lanes, I think that it would really help your cause if you also advocated for, other things that would help businesses. And that, if for no other reason than as a sign of goodwill. So maybe 30 minutes, maybe as a bicycle advocate, you really could care less if people could park for 2 hours or 30 minutes. But
absolutely.
Alan and other people, and we'd have to talk to other places on that particular block, because my block is a little bit different. If that's something that's really important, 30 minutes, then I think it would be really helpful for you to incorporate that in your your sort of advocacy platform, because you guys have a larger voice than probably the main streets. So Alan, what else would you like to see?
No, I like the idea of the 30-minute thing. After the DDOT meeting, I kind of thought maybe it would be best just to go with Plan B and see how that works traffic-wise, and then they could move it to Plan C, because Plan B really would just be signage.
It is effectively what it is today. Just as you said, different signage.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you would see how the traffic would actually flow, eliminating the reversible lane situation. And then it could move forward, to see if, it doesn't turn out to be a disaster or something. I mean,
Also, just to
my thought on,
on
less
some-
invasive, less money, less everything.
Yeah. I was just gonna say there are a couple gyms that we have on Allen's side, which is a Head Start camp, where parents literally just drop off their kids. And you're saying in Plan C, Allen's side is not going to be affected, right?
That's the east side, Garrett.
Sorry.
The west
So
side.
I mean,
again,
Alan said it's the east side.
Yeah, it's the west side. We're on the west side. The hardware store is on the east side. No, I got it wrong. You're right.
Yep.
I've got it wrong. East. You're right.
Yeah. So, okay, Alan's on the east side.
East side. Yeah.
So I'm hesitant to promise anything, because I'm not developing these plans. But I think, as you said, to the extent where it's possible, we want to be working together on this. I think I certainly have every interest in making sure that Van Ness talking with Van Ness Main Street as well, that Woodley Park Main Street and all the awesome businesses and other programs, I didn't know about the Head Start program, that they can remain there and flourish. I would be incredibly frustrated and devastated if knowing that my actions had driven a business away. So that's certainly not my goal. But I do think that, looking forward, a decision is not going to be made tomorrow and then construction made the next, starting the next day. For better or worse, this is sort of a long process of, which I think mostly is a good thing, because now, is a chance to speak up and talk about the important things. There are some elements of the designs that would rule out some future uses, but there's a whole lot of flexibility. So, once it's decided, say, that we want to preserve, a strip of parking along the east side of the street, there's a lot of decisions in the future as to how exactly that space is used. Is it 30-minute parking? Is it 15-minute parking to encourage that sort of pickup drop off? People keep on moving. Is it full-time loading? You can't park here at any time unless you've got a giant truck and things need to come off. Or is it, longer term residential parking? Those are all decisions that can be made block by block. And I think, I welcome the ideas, and I'm happy to pass them on.
So
I wanted to also,
okay.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think so. So you had been circulating a letter asking businesses to sign on whether we support bike lanes. And I think that, for example, Alan, if you just say, do you support bike lanes? He might be inclined to say no, because he associates that with something that might be different from what you're thinking. So what might be helpful, and DeAndre, this is something that the Main Street directors can coordinate with WABA on, is if we are in agreement on some of these things, is to rework your letter to say, I am the owner of such and such business and I support bike lanes, but also the other things, so that it makes clear that we want to keep parking. We want to potentially change the time limits for the meters. Because I don't think you're going to get any Main Streets or businesses. Oh, thanks, May. Okay, May has to go too. I don't know that you're going to get businesses just to sign on to a blanket letter, well, except for maybe me, that says, I support bike lanes without anything else. So DeAndre, that really might be a good opportunity for you and the other Main Street directors to work with WABA on this. And that way too, we can use their loud, strong voice to our advantage as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Especially if, you're going to work with the companies like Jamboree Play and Music and Head First Camps, because some of the biggest opponents of this are those two businesses right there, because they have parents dropping off their kids and picking up their kids right on that side that Alan's on.
Mm-hmm. And that's on the east side.
That's correct. Yeah.
Sure. So I think there's
for safety is going to be a big issue too. So that's
absolutely
something to incorporate as well. That it's safer. It's safer for children. It's safer for pedestrians. Alan, what what other concerns do you have?
Well, the thing is, my concern is mostly the parking. I sort of don't. The bike lane goes up Woodley Place already. It's a few hundred feet to the east. I sort of don't understand what's wrong with those bike lanes going up Woodley Place like they do today.
I think Garrett, you probably know better than I do, but
quieter, safer.
I'd be happy to speak to that.
It's 300 feet, to the east.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I absolutely understand why you'd look at that and think, what do you guys, what's this about?
You're gonna tear up our street for this, when there's already a bike lane right there.
Well, I think you're absolutely right that for that 2 blocks, a lot of people will look at that and say, 3 blocks, excuse me. Especially because, those streets are already relatively low traffic. The fact that they switch directions halfway through, it can be a very low stress experience. I think getting back to my initial sort of discussion of what does it mean to make a place low stress for bicycling that's, attractive and compelling, even approachable for, an 8-year-old, an 80-year-old, and everybody in between, certainly a family. The immediate environment, yes, is really critical, but it's also the how am I getting from A to B? So the more little squiggles we put in, the more barriers we put up to somebody actually using it. So if somebody, was traveling down Connecticut and wanted to get to DuPont Circle, where some protected bike lanes are currently being planned, there's a lot of questions as to how exactly that happens. But once you get to Cathedral, are you then taking a left and then you go down the block a bit in a very stressful riding environment right now, because you have a lot of cars heading down to the park and back up? Then you get to Woodley, and that's relatively nice. You take a right. And then you get to Calvert, where you have to cross over a bunch of lanes of traffic. So you have every single connection.
That would be the case. That would be the case even with the changes, because where does a bike lane go from there? I mean, how do you get across the bridges? How do you, I mean,
For sure.
Yeah.
But I bring this up mostly because, all up and down Connecticut, there are a few opportunities to sort of divert and say, well, this street's fine. But when you look at it, most of them only get you a couple of blocks before you're either back on Connecticut or in a place that's even more stressful and unappealing. So,
Alan, but you're also missing out on people that wouldn't be going to your shop. So, I mean, if we're going to create this experience and people are coming down Connecticut Avenue, then you're going to miss out on those 3,000 bikers who, who could be picking up flowers.
I also have my doubts if it'll be that many.
I'm not saying you're going to get 3,000 customers, but I mean, but it adds up. So if we're going to make all these changes, then why not take advantage of the benefits and the added business?
I just see that, very few are going up now for sure,
Well, absolutely, and I think that that a saying we often repeat is we don't decide whether or not to build a bridge based on how many people are swimming across the river. There's a certain sort of ableism of people who are riding now are few and far between because the street is so stressful. But we know that just those 2 blocks have a metro station, which is almost always, those bike racks are almost always full and people coming and going. We have a whole bunch of sort of fast casual, places for food, some fantastic restaurants, some fantastic retail. I think there are people who want to go there now, and to say, well, you can get 300 feet from there, but then you'll have to walk, is I think the same difficulty of saying, well, you could drive here, but you're going to circle the block a couple of times for parking.
Right. Well, exactly. So there's the dilemma. Connecticut Avenue
Indeed.
needs to be 80 feet instead of 60. But that can't happen.
Right. Well, and that gets down to, how are we using the space that we have today? Comes down to incentives and design and at a certain point, a choice, and saying, if we have to choose between cars zooming in from Maryland or making it easier for the folks who live within a couple of miles to get to your front door, I know what my choice would be, but that's not.
Well, I think, after the meeting, when was it, day before yesterday or whatever it was, I felt more comfortable with it. I felt more comfortable with either plan B or C. And my thought would be like, maybe go with plan B because it's less invasive and could always be changed. And then if that really works, then move it to plan C. As far as the river.
I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah.
I think just to and I'm not here to argue, but I think getting back to, who is that street accessible for? I look at plan B or concept B, and I see a street that still only caters to the needs of people driving or taking the bus or walking. That's a street that still you'll see, to the extent that people are riding on it, it won't be many. You will still have plenty of people in scooters and slower bicyclists on the sidewalks, which is not great from a pedestrian safety perspective. So it is a step away from the reversible lanes of today, but it's still not what we would call a complete street. It's a half measure that doesn't achieve some of the primary goals that the DDOT team is trying to achieve.
Well,
the final thing that I wanted to make sure that I didn't gloss over, I mentioned that sort of long process of, the DDOT team is going to be tallying up all the input that they get and meeting again with stakeholders to decide, do they stick with it as things are today, the no build option, move ahead with concept B or concept C. The final design, that will only produce what they call a 10% design. So there's still an enormous amount of like engineering design work that they need to do before they can even think about starting construction. So that's all to say, I know that every business in the city is struggling to sort of make ends meet in the pandemic. By the time that this thing is actually breaking ground, knocking on wood, the pandemic is long behind us. So I just wanted to make sure that we're
and like, is traffic, the question is the traffic going to return to previous levels? My thought is probably. I think that people, they say all these people are going to work from home, and some will, but I think most people are aching for the office collaboration.
I mean, I think the Ernst & Young study, one of the things that pointed out is that even if 10% of people decide to continue to work remotely, that it's not an all or nothing thing, and that even that would make a huge difference. So, I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I don't really know how it would work, but it seems like the studies are showing that no, not everybody's going to continue working remotely, but that the people who do, that would make a huge difference just on an average day, and also if we were to move forward with one of the with concept C in terms of the flow on the side streets.
Right.
Well, I think I mean, certainly I'm happy to stay on as long as you want, but I think this was a really good conversation, and I think it is pretty clear that we do have a lot in common with WABA, and that it's in our best interest to join forces, because there's a lot, certainly you need our support, but there's also a lot that you could do for us in addition to that. So, I think DeAndre, maybe I'll put you guys in touch, and perhaps if you're willing to have the same conversation with Cleveland Park and Van Ness. I do think it's good to have the smaller groups, because they have a different parking situation, and they're going to be concerned about different things. And I thought it was very helpful for Josh to be able to point out actual statistics and facts about the block in Woodley Park. So perhaps you could do the same thing for the other sections of Connecticut Avenue. And yeah, I mean, it could end up working out really well for everyone. So if you have any other questions, let me know. But otherwise, I think we'll end it here, and we have a lot of follow-up to do offline.
All right, well,
thanks so much for your time.
All right, thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye.
Nice meeting y'all.
Bye.